Imagine this scenario for a second. You spent, years scrimping and saving. You skipped the vacations, you cooked at home, and you finally managed to scrape together $100,000 for a down payment.
Right, which is no small feat these days.
Oh, absolutely not. So you find a place, you negotiate the purchase price, you sign that massive stack of papers, and you think, I did it. I am finally at the finish line.
Until the phone rings.
Exactly. Just days before you're supposed to get the keys, your lawyer calls. And they tell you that the government expects another like $30,000 in cash before they will let you open that front door.
Yeah, it is the ultimate invisible invoice of real estate. The closing costs. And specifically, the absolute heavyweight champion of closing costs here in Ontario.
Right. The land transfer tax, or LTT.
Right.
Welcome to today's deep dive, where we are taking on a highly specific, extremely high-stakes mission for you, the listener.
We definitely are.
We're looking at a stack of notes and legal insights to figure out how homebuyers and owners in Ontario can navigate this massive financial hurdle because, well, this tax isn't just a flat admin fee, is it? It's calculated on a sliding scale based on the purchase price of the property.
It is, yeah. And the higher the price, the steeper the climb, it operates almost like a wealth tax in disguise, really.
And if you are buying within the city limits of Toronto, it gets even more intense, right? Because you get hit twice.
Oh, yeah. You have the provincial land transfer tax, and then there's the municipal land transfer tax, or MLTT.
It is a brutal double whammy. You could literally be looking at tens of thousands of dollars just evaporating from your budget right at the finish line.
Evaporating, yeah.
So naturally, the very first question clients ask their realtors or lawyers is a simple one. Can I legally avoid this tax? Okay, so let's unpack this. Is there a trapdoor here?
Well, we need to establish a very firm baseline right out of the gate. As Mandeep Toor explains, any attempt to avoid or reduce the land transfer tax through sneaky price adjustments or, under-the-table side arrangements constitutes illegal tax evasion.
Right, so no secret cash handoffs in a parking lot.
Full stop. You cannot just pretend the house cost less than it did or pay the seller a chunk of cash secretly to lower the registered sale price. The government will catch you.
Okay, so that's the illegal route. What about the legal route?
Well, there are legitimate paths to eliminate or reduce that burden, but they are found under very strict legal exemptions in the Land Transfer Tax Act.
Right, so we aren't talking about shady loopholes or secret handshakes here. We are talking about strict compliance with the law.
Exactly.
And I think the best way to tackle this is to follow the natural life cycle of a property owner, because avoiding this tax requires jumping through highly specific legal hoops depending on, well, what stage of life you are in.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, yeah. Let's trace the whole journey.
So let's start at the very beginning, the entry level. The very first exemption most people encounter when they initially enter the real estate market. The first-time homebuyer rebate.
Right, it's the most well-known program for a reason, but honestly, familiarity breeds assumptions. A lot of people assume it's just an automatic discount for young people buying a starter home, and it is absolutely not.
Which is funny because I always picture this tax like a massive toll booth at the absolute end of a grueling real estate marathon. You're exhausted, you're totally out of cash, and there's a guy in a booth with his hand out.
That's a great visual.
So is the first-time homebuyer rebate just a free pass through that toll booth? Or are there hidden strings attached to this thing?
Oh, there are definitely strings, and they are woven from very rigid criteria. The province isn't just handing out money, They are trying to achieve a specific policy goal.
Okay, lay them out for me. What are the strings?
First, as Mandeep Toor explains, the purchaser must be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident.
Okay, that makes sense. It's a provincial benefit funded by taxpayers, so they want it going to actual residents. They aren't trying to subsidize international investors.
Right, exactly. Second, as Mandeep Toor explains, the purchaser must occupy the home as their principal residence within 9 months of closing.
Wait, 9 months? So I can't buy an investment property, rent it out immediately, and claim the rebate just because it's technically the first home I've ever purchased?
Nope, exactly. And that goes right back to the policy intent. This exemption is fundamentally about housing people who actually live and work in the community. It is not designed to facilitate real estate portfolios.
Okay, fair enough. That seems pretty straightforward.
But it's the third string that really trips people up. As Mandeep Toor explains, the purchaser and their spouse, if applicable, must have never owned a home or an interest in a home anywhere else in the world.
Wait, Anywhere else in the world. Let's pause on that. That is incredibly broad. Why does Ontario care if I owned a property in another country?
Because the province is strictly trying to prevent international property owners from exploiting a system meant to help genuine ground floor participants enter the market.
Okay, but global.
Yeah, the global nature of that criteria means that if you owned a fraction of a property in another hemisphere decades ago, you are disqualified.
So wait, if I inherited a tiny rundown shack in another country 20 years ago and my name was on a deed, I lose the Ontario rebate.
You do, yeah. What's fascinating here is how absolute the rule is. The law doesn't have the resources to accurately measure or verify the value of foreign property.
Right, they can't send an appraiser to a shack halfway across the world.
Exactly. They can't easily check if your overseas asset is a multi-million-dollar villa or a completely worthless shack. So they just apply a blanket ban. If you had an ownership interest, you are not a first-time homebuyer in the eyes of Ontario.
That is wild. It really forces you to take a hard inventory of your entire life history and your spouse's life history too before you claim that rebate.
And you must be honest, because, as Mandeep Toor explains, auditing these claims is something the Ministry of Finance takes very seriously.
Okay, wow. But let's say you pass that test. You are a true first-time buyer. You get the rebate, you get through the toll booth, you buy the house, and now you own the property.
You're officially in the market.
Right. But inevitably, life doesn't just freeze. Situations change. People get married, they get divorced, or they decide they want to pass property on to their kids. This brings us to the second stage of the property life cycle, which comes with a whole new set of tax implications.
It really does, because any time a property changes hands, or even when a percentage of ownership changes hands, like adding someone to a deed, the province looks at that as a transfer.
And transfers mean taxes.
By default, transfers trigger the tax.
See, this is where it feels counterintuitive to me. Earlier, I was thinking that transferring a house to your own family should be like, I don't know, sliding a plate of potatoes across the dinner table. It shouldn't cost you a fortune just to pass the dish.
Right. You'd think so.
But clearly the government doesn't see it that way. So let's look at spouses first.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the law generally recognizes married spouses as a single economic unit. So, as Mandeep Toor explains, if a client is transferring an interest in a property to a spouse, the transaction is typically exempt from the land transfer tax.
So if I bought a house before I met my partner and after we get married, I just want to add their name to the title so we own it together, boom, no tax.
As long as no consideration is being exchanged.
Consideration. Okay, that's a very specific piece of legal jargon. We need to break that down. What exactly does the province mean by consideration?
So, in contract law, consideration means the value that is exchanged between parties. It's the money, the goods, or the services you trade for the property. It's what proves a transaction actually took place.
Okay, so paying cash is consideration.
Exactly. Now, with spouses, as Mandeep Toor explains, if a mortgage is registered against the property, this will not necessarily derail the exemption.
Wait, hold on. I need to understand the mechanics here. How does a mortgage affect a free gift? If I give a house to someone, I'm giving them a house.
Ah. But are you just giving them a house, or are you also giving them debt? Let's use a better analogy than a plate of potatoes. Think of the house like a backpack.
Okay, I'm tracking with you. A backpack.
If I hand you my backpack for free, that is a gift. There is no consideration. But what if you open that backpack and find a $500,000 mortgage inside?
Oh.
Right. By taking the backpack, you are now legally responsible for paying that debt.
Oh, because I'm relieving you of a massive financial burden.
Precisely. If I owe $500,000 to the bank and you take over that $500,000 debt, you basically just paid me $500,000.
Wow, okay. That flips the whole concept of a gift on its head.
It does. And this raises a critical point about how the law views mortgages. As Mandeep Toor explains, assuming a mortgage is deemed consideration for the purposes of calculating the land transfer tax.
So if there's a mortgage, the government says it isn't really a gift at all. It's a sale, and the price of the sale is the size of the debt you took over.
Exactly. But the law carves out an exception for spouses where that mortgage assumption doesn't break the tax exemption. Because again, you are a single economic unit.
Right, you share the backpack anyway.
Exactly. And similarly, if things don't work out and the spouse is separate, the province isn't going to punish you with taxes for dividing your shared assets.
That's a relief, at least.
However, as Mandeep Toor explains, if property is being transferred between separating parties, the resulting owner is only exempt from the tax if it's done according to a formal written separation agreement or a court order.
So it can't just be an informal, hey, you take the house, I'll take the car, written on a napkin at a coffee shop.
Exactly. Why? Because people would absolutely fake a separation just to transfer a house tax-free.
Oh, of course they would.
Yeah, so the government needs a strict paper trail, proving this is a legitimate, legally binding division of assets resulting from a real separation, not just a casual transfer to avoid taxes.
That makes perfect sense. So we've established that spouses get a bit of a free pass, but what happens when you try to expand that economic unit? Like, what happens when a parent tries to pass that wealth down to their child while they are still alive, like gifting to kids?
This is where that concept of consideration really bites. As Mandeep Toor explains, the Land Transfer Tax Act does not specifically exempt gifts of land from the tax.
That seems harsh. I mean, the province has no problem with me giving assets to my spouse, but the minute I try to hand that same backpack to my kid, they want to cut.
Well, there is a workaround, but it's incredibly narrow. As Mandeep Toor explains, if a property is being transferred as a gift for nil consideration to a child, and the property is entirely mortgage-free, no LTT will apply.
Mortgage-free, or encumbrance-free, I think is the term I saw in the notes.
Yes, encumbrance-free, meaning no debt tied to it whatsoever.
Yeah. So the parents have to have paid off the entire house because, going back to your backpack analogy, if there's even a tiny mortgage left, the kid is assuming debt.
Yes.
And that debt equals consideration, and consideration triggers the tax.
You've got it. The moment a child takes over even a small mortgage on that family home, the province views that assumed debt as the purchase price.
Oh, wow.
So if the parents gift $1 million home to their kid, but there is still like a $200,000 mortgage on it, the government calculates the land transfer tax based on that $200,000 figure.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because building directly on that idea of parents trying to help their kids enter the market, there is another scenario that I think is incredibly common today.
Oh, definitely.
What about parents who don't want to actually give a whole house to their kid, but they just need to use their good credit history to help their kid qualify for a mortgage?
Ah, the strategic cosigner scenario. So the kid has the down payment, they can make the monthly payments, but the bank says their income isn't quite high enough on paper. So the parent goes on the title of the house just to satisfy the lender's risk requirements.
Right. The parent is acting like temporary financial scaffolding. They prop the kid up so the building can be built.
That's a great way to put it.
But eventually, the kid gets a better job, they can qualify for the mortgage on their own, and it's time for the scaffolding to come down. When the parent takes their name off the title 5 years later, does the government swoop in and charge a tax on that transfer? Because it's taking a name off a deed is a transfer, right?
It is a transfer, yeah. But this is where the concept of trust transfers comes in. And it is a brilliant piece of legal mechanics, really.
Okay, let's hear it.
As Mandeep Toor explains, if a property is purchased in trust for a beneficial owner, which in this case is the child, and the land transfer tax is paid in full in the initial purchase, a subsequent transfer, removing the trustee, which is the parent, does not attract the tax.
Wait, I need you to explain that to me like I'm 5. Beneficial owner versus legal title. If my mom's name is on the deed at the registry office, so the bank gives me the loan, doesn't she legally own the house?
This is one of those fascinating concepts in real estate law. The law actually allows you to split ownership into 2 different buckets.
Okay, buckets.
Legal title is just the name written on the public registry. It's who the bank and the government see. Beneficial ownership is who actually gets the profit, who pays the daily bills, who mows the lawn, and who actually lives there.
So the parent has legal title, but the kid is the true beneficial owner.
Exactly. The parent never truly owned the house in a functional sense.
Mm-hmm.
They were just holding legal title and trust to satisfy the bank.
Oh, that is clever.
Right. Because the tax was paid by the kid at the very beginning when the property was bought. Taking the parent off the deed later isn't viewed as a new sale. It's just the fulfillment of the original arrangement.
That makes total sense.
But, and this is a massive but, you cannot just make this claim retroactively.
Meaning, I can't just go to the tax auditor 5 years later and say, oh yeah, by the way, we totally meant for that to be a trust arrangement back in the day, so please don't tax us now.
Exactly. They won't buy it. The intent of the arrangement must be legally documented from day one. As Mandeep Toor explains, to be eligible for this exemption, there must be absolutely no consideration exchanged when the parent comes off the title.
Right. No money changing hands.
And the client must produce adequate documentation, typically a formal trust agreement, confirming the parent had no genuine beneficial ownership from the very start.
proactive paperwork. So if you are listening to this right now and you're about to co-sign for your kid, or you are having your parents co-sign for you, you need that trust agreement drafted by your lawyer before you close on the house.
It is the only way to prove to the province that the scaffolding was always meant to be scaffolding and not a permanent taxable part of the building.
That is such a vital tip. Okay, let's zoom out even further. We've moved from entering the market through marriage to helping a child buy a home. Now let's look at the final stage of the property life cycle. Generational transitions.
Right, the big stuff.
Yeah, transferring entire estates, family farms, and family businesses.
This is where the stakes get incredibly high and the legal definitions get incredibly precise.
Well, looking at the notes for this section, I actually see a massive contradiction from what we talked about earlier. I am genuinely confused here. Let's go back to the backpack full of debt.
Okay, bringing the backpack out again.
We established that if a parent gifts me a house while they're alive, and that house has a mortgage on it, I have to pay land transfer tax because assuming that mortgage equals consideration.
Correct. The government taxes living gifts with mortgages.
But if that exact same parent passes away and I inherit that exact same house with that exact same mortgage, I don't pay the tax. Why does death magically erase the consideration rule? What does this all mean?
It is a profound double standard, really, and it's a fascinating quirk in the legal system. As Mandeep Toor explains, inheriting real estate in Ontario from an estate, whether through a will or the laws of intestacy, does not attract LTT.
Intestacy, that just means dying without a will, right?
Spot on. Yeah, when you inherit, the exemption applies. And you are right to point out the difference because, as Mandeep Toor explains, unlike a gifted transfer while alive, this inheritance exemption applies regardless of whether a mortgage exists against the property.
It is wild. Why the double standard? I mean, why does the government let you off the hook just because someone died?
Well, it all comes down to the mechanism of the transfer. Remember, the law cares deeply about how things happen. When you are gifted a property while a person is alive, you are actively choosing to assume their debt.
Right, it's a choice.
You are making a transaction. But when someone passes away, the transfer happens by automatic operation of estate law. The estate itself is responsible for settling debts, and you, as the beneficiary, are simply receiving the net asset that remains.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the legal view is that the value of the consideration exchanged between the deceased estate and you is technically nil. The debt is still attached to the property, sure, but the act of inheriting it isn't viewed as a taxable transaction in the same way a living, breathing person handing you a debt is.
Wow. So timing is literally everything. The exact same property with the exact same debt going to the exact same child triggers thousands in taxes on Tuesday, but is entirely tax-free on Wednesday if the parent passes away.
That is the power of estate law. It completely changes the game.
Okay, what about things that are bigger than just a single house, like a family farm or a business?
Well, the province does recognize the economic importance of keeping active farms in the family. Usually, transferring large plots of land triggers massive taxes. However, as Mandeep Toor explains, transfers of farmed land between family members may qualify for an exemption.
Okay, that's good news for farmers.
But it is not automatic. There are many, many conditions to satisfy to prove it's a legitimate family farming operation continuing on, not just land speculation.
And I imagine it's the same for family businesses. Let's push on this. Say I own a downtown condo, and I decide I want to avoid personal liability or taxes, so I just throw that condo into a numbered family corporation. I tell the government, hey, I run a home office out of this condo, so it's a family business transfer. Does that work?
The province is going to look right through that in a heartbeat.
I figured.
Yeah, corporate reorganizations are heavily, heavily scrutinized. You can't just slap a family corp label on a holding company to avoid taxes. Let's say an individual owns land and truly runs a business on it, like a manufacturing shop, and they want to transfer that land into a family business corporation. As Mandeep Toor explains, this transfer can be exempt, but several dominoes have to fall perfectly.
Let me guess. Incredibly strict legal definitions.
Exactly. The individual must have been engaged in an active business on the land. They have to transfer both the land and the business to the corporation together. The shareholders of that corporation must be members of the individual's family. And crucially, as Mandeep Toor explains, the family business corporation must continue to carry on that active business on the land after the transfer.
It sounds like an absolute minefield. I mean, the term active business alone probably has 50 pages of dense case law defining exactly what it means. Your downtown condo idea definitely wouldn't pass the test.
It wouldn't even come close.
Yeah.
These are the most complex exemptions to navigate. You cannot just guess your way through a corporate reorganization and hope the Ministry of Finance agrees with your personal interpretation of what an active business is.
Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway here. We have covered an incredible variety of ways the land transfer tax can be navigated through the life cycle of an owner. We've gone from the very first moment you enter the market as a first-time buyer with strict residency rules, through marriages and formal separation agreements.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We looked at the brilliant strategy of trust agreements for cosigners, all the way up to complex inheritances and corporate reorganizations.
And in every single one of those scenarios, the line between a brilliant, perfectly legal tax exemption and a disastrous financial penalty is razor thin.
Yeah, it really is.
As Mandeep Toor explains, failing to carefully consider these exact conditions and eligibility requirements can lead to a violation of the Act. And if you violate the Act, you aren't just paying the original tax you try to avoid, you are looking at penalties, interest, and fines.
It takes an already painful closing cost and turns it into a financial catastrophe, which is why having an experienced real estate lawyer isn't just a formality, it is absolutely essential.
100%.
They are the ones who know exactly where the trapdoors are, and more importantly, they know how to build the scaffolding properly so it doesn't collapse on you 5 years down the road.
Exactly. But,
Yeah.
if we step back from all the technical mechanics and look at all these exemptions collectively, the first-time buyers, the spousal transfers, the trust relationships, the inheritances, it reveals something really profound about the nature of this tax.
Oh,
Well, when you strip it all down, the land transfer tax is essentially a tax on strangers doing business.
interesting.
Right. When you look at all the ways to legally avoid it, they almost entirely revolve around deep, documented family ties. Spouses, children, estates, family farms. It makes you wonder, how heavily do our provincial tax policies secretly shape and define what words like family and trust actually mean in the eyes of the law?
Wow.
We like to think of family as this purely social, emotional concept. But here, family is a deeply financial, strictly defined legal boundary that can literally be measured in tens of thousands of dollars.
That is a fascinating way to look at it. The provincial tax code acting as a mirror for how the government defines our closest personal relationships. That is definitely something to chew on the next time you're scrolling through property listings or, thinking about helping a relative out.
For sure.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the fine print of the world around you, and we'll catch you next time.